Hello everyone, welcome back. This is part 2 of this news bulletin for today, Tuesday, August 14th, 2012. We're finishing up on Russia here, and I'll just get started. We were just talking about their new immigration policies in Russia and their new social policies and stuff like that. Another thing that I noticed is the birth rate. In Europe and in the United States, the birth rates are down. People aren't having children, either because they're too sterile, physically they can't have them, or financially they can't afford them. So it says here, Russian and American birth rates have rapidly converged. It goes on here and it says, I'm in the middle of doing a longer post on recent Russian demographic trends, but it goes on here and it says that upon doing the research, she stumbled upon something that was far too interesting to pass up. It says, although Russia is portrayed as a demographic nightmare, a dying bear that is rapidly receding from the world stage and that is doomed to irrelevance, it says here that the U.S. is often portrayed as enjoying demographics that are uniquely robust among developed nations. And it says here, I would argue that the reality is quite a bit more complicated. Although America benefits greatly from immigration, they're talking about diversity and all that, its fertility rate has actually consistently been sub-replacement for almost all of the past 20 years. Knowing that due to the after effects of the Great Recession, as they call it, birth rates in the United States have generally been declining for the past few years, and also knowing that birth rates in Russia have been increasing, I decided to create a chart showing what's happened since the late 1990s. It says here, I was even surprised by the extent and rapidity of the convergence between Russian and American birth rates. So, yeah, it actually it goes all the way back to 1997, where Russia's birth rate per 1,000 was about 8.5, as opposed to the United States, which was at 14. And now in 2011, the United States is down to 12.5, whereas Russia has climbed from 8.5 to 12.5, almost 13. It says here the U.S. has thankfully not experienced either a mortality surge or a fertility plunge that are even remotely comparable to those experienced by Russia during its transition from communism, quote, transition, right? But it says here, however, with all that being said, I'm very surprised that more attention hasn't been paid to the recession's demographic costs and the long-term impact this will have on the U.S. economy. It says if this trend holds true, Russia's 2012 birth rate will actually exceed the U.S. So start learning how to speak Russian. It says here, Taiwan allows imports of U.S. beef containing banned feed additives. So legislators in Taiwan passed a law allowing imports of U.S. beef containing ractopamine or something, however you want to pronounce that. But it says here on Wednesday, this additive promotes leanness in animals that is currently banned in Taiwan. The Taiwan Solidarity Union is criticizing a new law claiming the Taiwan president's government is disregarding the Taiwanese people's health. So it says here this ban went into effect last year. This is a proposal in March to partially lift the ban set off public protests by farmers and food safety activists, during which eggs and manure were thrown at government buildings. So I guess that's how you get shit done. Then it says here Russians buy up Angus. That's why I included this story. Because here, in the United States, they're giving you just all this crap meat and stuff like that, and they're shipping it over to other countries, right, to kill them as well. But it says here, exports of these Angus cows to Russia are tipped to exceed 30,000 head this year. It goes on here and it says, addressing Angus Australia's national conference, said Russia's continuing strong demand was likely to push Australia's total export of breeding heifers to over 55,000. Last year, Australia exported a record 24,000 head, of which 95% were Angus to Russia. So this individual said Russians' demand for breeding stock was the result of President Putin's push to cut the country's $3 billion annual bill on imported beef. The Russian government was committed to subsidizing its breeding and processing sector in an attempt to lift its domestic beef supply from 65% to 85% of the country's needs. He said certification included a rigorous inspection of all cattle. Then we have this different changes that are going on. Russian MPs suggest allowing public use of firearms shortly after Colorado shootings. See, I wanted to cover this, July 26th, but it's just like I've been wanting to put all this into, 1 or 2 videos. Following the shooting spree in the Colorado cinema, Russian legislators have drafted a bill which would allow public use of firearms. It says here the law's sponsors hope to curb crime rates, while opponents say legal air guns already cause enough damage. The principle behind the drafted bill allowing the private use of handguns is, quote, "My home is my castle," end quote, so any invasion of private space could be met with loaded barrels. So I don't necessarily agree with all these things you have to fulfill, like a criminal record. You could have a criminal record just for doing anything, right? And you can be deemed mentally ill for just about anything. And it says here, to have the right to use the handguns, Russians would have to prove they're not mentally ill, have no criminal record, and are not addicted to alcohol or drugs, and undergo special training. So this I just thought I'd include in there. I remember covering this. This is one of my own videos back from November 2009, when a Russian minister was telling citizens to fight back against police because of police corruption and brutality. So it says here, Putin pushes nuclear space defense reform. He said he's not planning to enter a new arms race, but urged senior officials to develop a nuclear arsenal, further, along with Russia's own air-space defenses, so that no one in the world doubts their effectiveness. He was speaking at a special meeting on the state weapon program that took place in the southern Russian city of Sochi on Thursday. He says, "We're not going to be entering an arms race, but no one should have any doubts in the reliability and effectiveness of our nuclear potential, as well as the means of air and space defense. The nuclear weapons remain the most important guarantee of Russia's sovereignty and territorial integrity and play a key role in maintaining the regional balance and stability," he said. And then we have Putin says Russian military will receive 1,600 new warplanes and helicopters, and we're talking primarily about providing our forces with state-of-the-art modern technology, he said at an air show on the eve of the 100th anniversary of the Russian Air Force on Saturday. They said that they will be planning on spending $720 billion by 2020 to re-equip the military. So yeah, it says weakened by spending cuts since the collapse of the Soviet Union in the early 90s. It's crazy because the United States spends about 600 that's what they say, 600 billion budget every year on defense. But I guess this is over like an 8-year period. It says Russia warns it will not back Britain on Syria's sanctions. And this just goes into what we were talking about earlier with Libya. And, under Medvedev, Russia didn't really stand behind Libya at all. And then with Syria, it's a completely different story with Putin in power. And also you have Iran. Putin, Russia opposes forced sanctions on Iran. And this is what it's all about, right? I'm finishing up with Russia here, and then we're going to segue into North Korea here in a couple minutes. The last 5 minutes of this video. And it's what? SCO versus NATO. So the Western collision with the Eurasian Balkans. And it says here, the editor says, "I don't entirely agree with this article, as Russia and China have a stake in the economic and political development of Central Asia. Just look at Russia's dealings with the EU over oil and gas, and the skirmish over Russian enclaves like South Ossetia." It says you can also look at China's behavior over the South China Sea. They have flexed their hegemony over Central Asia for a very long time and don't take kindly to Obama's big pivot to Asia. It will be interesting to see the progression of the SCO framework in the near future. They're talking about the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. That's what it stands for. It isn't a real counterbalance to NATO yet, and won't be unless many more Asian nations are involved. So yeah, SCO is actually, they had their first training exercise, like a military exercise this past year. Then Raul Castro, Cuba willing to sit down with the United States, said, and this was the 26th, again, the same time frame when all this was coming out. I thought it was kind of unusual. It also kind of made me wonder, is like, I've mentioned this before, about the 13 ruling families, about how the Rothschild family, the head of the Rothschilds, was basically the current Pindar, which is basically the ones that are going to hold the crown, or the Olympic torch of all these families. And I just, when all these articles started coming out towards the end of July, I kind of had the feeling that possibly they're done, that the Rothschilds and their Pindar thing or title is gone, and that of course they're going to try to hold on to it for as long as I can. So that's why I realized, nothing's going to happen at the Olympics. The economy may not totally fall apart. They're just going to fight and kick and scream until they basically lose their power, possibly to them. And the Romanovs are all the way down here, so it's they got a lot of power up there, so much that they actually have, think about it, in England, it's not the royalty that matters. I mean, the parliament and all that, government's a joke. Many awake Britons know that. And it's like, what, these people, the Windsors, they probably answer to the Rothschilds. So, again, I don't know what's going on, but I do feel like the winds have changed direction here. And not necessarily for the better, just change. So,
It looks like one of the world's most reclusive states, that of North Korea, is taking a step in another direction. Its young leader is said to be set on a path of reform. Kim Jong-un this week dismissed the North's long-standing military chief, who it's understood was opposed to the planned changes. South Korean media report that the sacked general might even have been killed after a gunfight broke out when an attempt was made to arrest him.
Well, I think the fact that the North Korean regime has even addressed the need for reform is a huge step in the right direction. I think at this stage, Kim Jong-un is looking to win hearts and minds, and he's been undoubtedly very successful doing that so far. Now, stylistically, he's changed the leadership policy of North Korea. He's given 2 public speeches, something that his father has never done. And on North Korean state television, we're now seeing female performers wearing things like tank tops and mini skirts. And it may sound kind of insignificant, but in North Korea, that is a sign of times changing. Now, in that recent speech that Kim Jong-un made, he spoke of North Koreans bringing about a time where North Koreans would no longer have to tighten their belts. Also, we have instructions before Kim Jong-il was supposed to have passed away. He gave instructions to Kim Jong-un basically to do as much business with China and Russia as possible, and we of those reforms, rather. What I'm trying to say is that 60 years of sanctions on North Korea has not worked, and I think things like the Chinese opening up special economic zones in the north of the country. We have 2 islands that are supposedly being developed into North Korean Hong Kong. We have the Razan special economic zone in the northern part of the country, and we have the Kaesong special industrial complex, which is South Korean owned, and the North Koreans basically produce the products in there. So I think all these things are a step in the right direction. But as long as the U.S. and the ROK are illegally firing during these military drills into North Korea's territorial waters, that's against international law, you're going to get belligerence from North Korea.
Here, but I must ask you, when it comes to reforms that Kim Jong-un is trying to implement, or at least trying to voice here, do you think the reforms could impact relations between both Koreas?
Well, I think the international community at this point really needs to emphasize and to encourage direct talks between the North and the South. I mean, that is really what we need to see happen. And until that happens, there is no prospect for peaceful reunification.
So this first article I have up relates to what we were just talking about, which was North Korea just basically trying to open up a little bit more and dealing more with China. North Korea's Kim, powerful uncle in Beijing. So North Korea's leader, Kim Jong-un's uncle, is in China to discuss setting up a joint commercial project, according to the news agency. North Korea, as they say, faces economic decline with very few prospects of improvement. It says feeding a population of 24 million is a major problem even in years of a good harvest. So the way I see it is sanctions, right? And you look at this, China encourages firms to invest in North Korea. They said here China announced plans to help major firms invest in North Korea, as Kim Jong-un is believed to be planning reforms aimed at bringing its troubled economy back on track. So, yeah, it says here the country is isolated from global commerce because of international sanctions over its nuclear programs. In other words, to defend its sovereignty. But it says what? And this, of course, is to break the will of the people to turn against their government, so that outside influence or outside entities can come in and do what they're going to want to do. But they say that North Korea has been hit by floods in recent months and has asked for food aid. It's also suffered a famine in the mid-90s. So we know that big-time global weather modification started taking place around, 96? So weather wars. Not your usual killer product. North Korea announces own iPad. So they're making their own iPads now. Loosen your belts. It's worth encouraging the signs of economic opening in the world's ghastliest regime. So that's right, Kim Jong-un and new wife. He has a new wife, and I guess it was actually against his father's wishes. And they're visiting an amusement park in its grand opening, a new amusement park in the capital. And I noticed this is right around the same time, July 26th, when I noticed kind of a trend, which North Korea flag blunder Mars Olympics Day 1. So you think North Korea caused this, right? It's no, the Olympics, they put up the wrong flag with a North Korean player, to like a slap in their face. And you can go through the comment board and read the ignorant comments of most people, Westerners, liberals, and it's like, what happened? What if that happened to you? Oh, it wouldn't happen, because you are in a Zionist-occupied territory. And if you're not, you'll get this: U.S. and South Korean troops target practice with North Korean flag and live fire drill. and then be able to accuse that country of provocation.